Hard work usually pays off, but for me, it just paid for someone else's promotion. I'm Cameron Aldridge, and I've been at Lockage Digital for almost a decade, 9 years of early mornings. Late nights and weekends nobody asked for. I built. Things way beyond my job description and never sought praise. Yet, when the big announcement came, the one we were all expecting, my name wasn't called. It was hers, the boss's daughter. Let me rewind a bit to just before that morning changed. Everything. It started with a slim, cream-colored file folder discreetly slid across my desk by an HR contact I'd mentored years ago. "You should start putting together your VP application," she whispered with a warm smile. "Everyone's saying it's your time." I tried to hide it, but something sparked inside me. It wasn't exactly pride, it was recognition. After almost a decade of fighting for every bit of progress, someone finally said it out loud. I belonged at that table, and in many ways I'd already earned my spot. In my third year, I landed the Morven Tech deal, $12 million in long-term licensing. That single contract kept us afloat through 2 tough quarters. I developed the onboarding system still used by every department, trained dozens of new hires, and consulted on product launches that made headlines. I wasn't flashy. I didn't grab credit in meetings or put my name on every slide deck. I just did the work, all of it, because I truly believed someone would eventually notice. Apparently, someone did, but not in the way I expected. Later that week, during a coffee break, my closest colleague leaned in, lowering her voice. I heard. "From Daniel in strategy, the CEO's been quietly grooming Mallory to step in. She's been shadowing him in meetings." I blinked. "Mallory?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice neutral. She nodded. "I know. I thought it was a joke at first." 2. Mallory Lockage, the one who once asked what a KPI was in a performance review. Who left meetings early and took 3-week vacations in the middle of major launches. That Mallory managed a polite smile and said nothing but something. Inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just a feeling that the game I thought I was playing might have had different rules all along. And I'd been reading the wrong handbook. Monday morning arrived with a harsh glow of fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee. I took my usual second-row seat in the conference room, laptop open, notes ready. It was a quarterly strategy meeting, high stakes, high pressure, and word had spread that a major leadership announcement would kick things off. I'd barely slept. There was a quiet hum as everyone settled in. Faces subtly nodded my way, almost encouragingly. Even the CFO gave me a quick wink. I couldn't help the faint smile tugging at my lips. This could be it. After 9 years, maybe. It was finally my time. Then the glass door slid open. CEO David Lockage strode in with his usual confidence, followed closely by his daughter, Mallory, who looked more ready for a runway than a strategy session. He cleared his throat. "Good morning, everyone. Before we dive in, I want to announce a transition. We've been quietly preparing behind the scenes." The room fell silent. My hands froze over the keyboard. He smiled. "I'm proud to announce that Mallory Lockage will be stepping into the role of Vice President of Strategic Operations effective immediately." There it was. No build-up, no mention of other candidates, no recognition of my name, just hers. Oh, a smattering of polite applause echoed around the room. I joined in slowly. My hands clapped, but my chest felt hollow, like something essential had quietly and permanently slipped away. Mallory beamed like a debutante. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, David," she said with a breathy laugh. "I'm so excited to carry the torch and help lead us through this exciting chapter." I kept my face neutral, not cold, not shocked, just controlled. But inside, I was unraveling. This was the seed I'd built. The strategy she would now oversee was one I had drafted, refined, and stress-tested over months of data and revisions. I had met with every department head, translated technical specs into clear deliverables, and created contingency plans for every possible snag. Mallory hadn't been in the room for any of it. Before we get into the numbers, she chirped, opening her sleek gray folder. I'd love to walk everyone through the strategic roadmap I've put together for Q3. She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up. Stared. It was my deck, my words, my diagrams. She hadn't even changed the font. I blinked slowly, gripping the edge of the table. It's not a single footnote, not a nod, not a mention that someone else had built. The foundation she was now standing on like it was her own. Everyone watched attentively as she rattled off the exact metrics I had written in my notes just last week. I had sent them to David on Friday. Clearly, he had passed them straight to her. I kept my posture straight, kept my mouth shut, but I wasn't okay. I wasn't angry yet. I was stunned, like someone had taken a piece of my body and claimed it wasn't mine. My eyes met the CFO's across the table. He didn't smile this time. He looked sorry. After the meeting, no one said anything, just a few awkward glances, quick exits, and lingering silence. I gathered my things in slow mechanical movements. I didn't cry, not then. But something had broken, and I knew deep in my gut I would. Never look at that conference room the same way again. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always come with slamming doors or shouting matches. Sometimes it arrives smiling, dressed in compliments and good intentions. The morning after the promotion announcement, I came into work earlier than usual, even though my body ached with a quiet heaviness. My sleep had been thin, haunted by the same moment playing on loop. Her voice, her smile, my strategy flashing. Behind her, but I still showed up. I sat at my desk, sipped lukewarm coffee, and opened the file labeled Q3 Recovery Pipeline. It was mine, after all, at least the work was. Okay. And if nothing else, I had my own standards to uphold. Mallory strutted over in heels far too tall for her balance, an oat milk latte in one hand and a bright, too-wide smile. Cameron, she called cheerfully. Morning. I looked up and gave the most neutral nod I could manage. Morning. She leaned against the edge of my desk like we were college roommates catching up. Not colleagues in a business she'd just hijacked. I just wanted to say thank you again for everything, she said, her voice dripping with sugar. You've always been such an inspiration to me. Stomach tightened. She went on. Seriously? Everyone looks up to you here. I don't know how you keep so many moving parts together. It's honestly amazing. I said nothing, just blinked slowly. Oh, and the slide deck you sent, Dad, she added with a quick laugh. Flawless. It made things so much easier yesterday. I hope you didn't mind that I reused it. I figured since we're all a team, there's no point reinventing the wheel, right? I finally forced a polite smile, right? She beamed, clearly taking my silence as agreement. As soon as she walked away, I opened a new document on my personal laptop. Nothing related to company files, just something for me. I titled it Things They Didn't See. I started writing. It wasn't a journal. It wasn't revenge. It was just a record of the quiet erasures I was now witnessing in real time. I listed dates, project names, files. I included screenshots I'd forwarded to my personal email, notes from late meetings, drafts, timelines. It wasn't for legal action. Not yet. But it made me feel less invisible. Around noon, I got an internal message from Mallory titled, Quick Favor. I opened it. Hey, Cameron. Since I'll be stepping into the VP role full-time now, David suggested, it might be helpful if we do a little mini boot camp together just for the next 2 weeks. You could walk me through the core workflows, vendor relationships, that sort of thing, like a smooth handoff. Would that be okay? I stared at the screen for a long moment. My jaw tensed. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to laugh or scream. She wanted me to train her after taking the title, after taking my work. Now, she needed the instruction manual for a seat she never earned. And she expected me to be the one to give it to her with a smile. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stood up, walked to the break room, and poured another coffee with shaking hands. My reflection in the microwave door looked eerily calm, but I could feel the anger pulsing beneath the surface like a second heartbeat. They didn't see it. They never did. By the time I sat back down, I had typed just 2 words: noted, available. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is say yes while keeping every receipt. Some women break down in the face of betrayal. Others pick up the blueprint. By Thursday evening, after 3 days of walking through meetings like a ghost in my own job, I knew I had to stop waiting for someone to make things right. Mallory had been fluttering from one department to the next, like she was on a guided tours of a kingdom she hadn't built. I had been patient. I had been professional. I had even smiled. But deep beneath the surface, something had clicked into place. Not rage, not revenge, just decision. That night, I opened the slim locked drawer of the filing cabinet in my home office. The key was still taped beneath my desk lamp, untouched for over a year. I pulled out a black folder labeled simply Confidential Strategic Advisory, Aldridge. I flipped it open and felt the weight of everything I had forgotten I owned. 2 years. Earlier in the chaos of Lockage's post-pandemic reorganization, a group of private equity partners quietly approached me through a third-party consultant. They had watched my work from afar, read the quarterly reports I helped rewrite, traced the rise in profit margins after my system rollouts. They didn't want publicity. What they wanted was structure. I was tired. I was underpaid. I was ready. So, I agreed to consult on the development of a scalable strategic framework for internal innovation, something Lockage could license long-term without even knowing where it truly came from. I formed a single-member LLC, registered under an anonymous trust, and funneled the system through their back-end platform. The result? It's a very framework Mallory now thought she was leading. To $86 million AI integration roadmap. Mine, every flowchart, every metric, every training module. Lockage didn't own it. They licensed it. And the license had a clause. I remembered drafting it with quiet precision on a late November night. I turned to the page now, clause 9.4, and read it aloud under my breath, the words almost vibrating. In the stillness of my apartment, in the event that consultant Cameron Aldridge exits Lockage, digital of her own volition and without contractual breach, all rights to Framework X shall revert to the original IP holder, rendering any internal licensing null and void effective immediately. I exhaled slowly. That meant if I left the company in good standing, no drama, no legal entanglement. System would no longer belong to them. Mallory wouldn't just lose a job title, she'd lose the engine under the hood. And the board would be left staring at an $86 million car with no keys. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of that realization settle in. No need for fights, no need for raised voices or long-winded explanations, just a quiet exit and a transfer of control. People thought I was just the strategist. Didn't know I'd also written the rules. That weekend, I reviewed the original emails confirming the partnership, reread the notarized documents, and double-checked the digital trail linking the framework to my LLC. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being methodical. I hadn't worked this hard just to watch my ideas get paraded around by someone who couldn't even define them. By Sunday night, I had already drafted the first version of my resignation letter. It was professional, crisp, clean, but it ended with a sentence I knew would one day be remembered. The line wasn't bolded. It wasn't even in the same font. It was small, 10-point, almost like a whisper. But it carried the weight of 9 years and the power to flip everything. Because I didn't just build a system. I built the foundation and I made sure no one could ever steal it without losing everything when I walked away. By Monday morning, the decision was final. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at a table that I had already outgrown, but I wasn't walking away empty-handed either. That would have made this a story about loss. This wasn't that kind of story. Instead, I moved with a quiet calm. The kind you earn when you know where all the pieces are. And, more importantly, who really owns the board. I sat at my dining table with a fresh cup of black coffee and my personal laptop open in front of me. The city buzzed outside my window, unaware that somewhere on the 18th floor of Lockage Digital, a billion-dollar blueprint sat on the brink of slipping through their fingers. I pulled up the state business registry and typed in the name Aldrich Strategy Group LLC, filed 18 months ago. Still active, registered to a holding address in Delaware through a legal trust. Completely discreet, deliberately quiet. It was. A company I built not for attention, but for protection. I had spent years inside a system that treated ideas like free labor and vision like loyalty. I knew better than to leave something as powerful as intellectual property in the hands of anyone who called nepotism a succession plan. I clicked over to the framework licensing agreement. There it was, spelled out in black and white. Licensee, Lockage Digital Inc. Licensor, Aldrich Strategy Group LLC. I wasn't just the architect. I was the landlord. And Lockage, they'd been renting. The AI strategy framework, Framework X, as we'd codenamed it in the drafts, was legally mine. The diagrams, the process flow, the data integration models. Even the client communication cadence, every line of it traced back to the LLC I had formed in the shadows of my day job. Lockage's leadership never questioned it. They were too busy, celebrating the results to ask where the engine came from. They saw the numbers, the traction, the boardroom nods. They never bothered to examine the paperwork closely, and that was their mistake. Because buried in that licensing agreement, dated 15 months ago, was the signature of none other than David Lockage, CEO, father of Mallory, and now unknowingly the man who signed away his own leverage. He'd approved the adoption of Framework X under the assumption it was an internal creation drafted by his senior strategy team. He never read the appendix, never noticed the small print that listed Aldrich Strategy Group as the IP holder. Remembered the day it was signed. We were in his office reviewing quarterly goals. He had rushed the process, initialing page after page, while half listening to a voicemail on speakerphone. When he got to the final page, he didn't even pause. Same legal boilerplate, right? He had asked. I had nodded. Exactly. It wasn't a lie. It was legal. It just wasn't his. Now, I scrolled through the digital copy, highlighting the approval, date, the timestamp, and the attached board email that referenced Cameron's strategic model. All of it airtight. It was funny in a way. They thought they had the house because they had the keys, but I held the deed. And I wasn't angry anymore. That part had passed. What settled over me now was something deeper, something colder, clarity. Mallory might have had the title, but titles don't build systems. They don't retain clients. They don't predict tech shifts 6 quarters ahead. And they certainly don't override a binding license agreement. When I shut the laptop, my hands were steady. My breath was even. I didn't need to yell or demand. I didn't need to warn them. The clauses would do the talking for me soon enough because you can take someone's credit, their desk, their role. But if you forget who owns the foundation, the whole building falls. Winning quietly can feel a lot like losing when no one's around to witness it. By the time Friday evening rolled in, my email to HR was ready. I hadn't sent it yet. Just saved it as a draft and closed my work laptop. The framework, the clause, the license, the signature. It was all lined up. Everything I needed to take back what was mine, and everything they didn't know they were about to lose. But none of it felt like a triumph. It's not yet, because when I walked into my apartment that night, the silence was heavier than usual. I tossed my keys into the ceramic dish by the door and slipped off my shoes like I'd done 1,000 times before. But the motion felt slow, weighted. My body ached, not just from the stress of the week, but from the quiet fatigue that comes when you carry everything alone. The TV stayed off, so did the lights, except the kitchen lamp. I poured a glass of water and stared out the window, watching. Headlights flicker across the high-rise windows across the street. Somewhere in that chaos, people were going home to families, dinners, warmth. Me, I was going home to strategy files and a pending resignation. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Mom," I answered immediately. "Hey," I said, trying to sound brighter than I felt. Her voice came through soft, a little strained. "Hi, sweetheart. You home? Just walked in. How are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm all right," she said. "The nurse let me take a little walk around the garden this morning. Didn't faint once." I tried to smile. "That's progress." She hesitated, then added gently, "Listen, if you're thinking about leaving that job, I want you to know I wouldn't blame you." I paused. "You don't. Cam, you've given them everything, and they keep taking more. I've seen it. It's not weakness to walk away. Sometimes that's how you win." My throat tightened. I leaned against the fridge and closed my eyes. "I'm not walking away with nothing." "I know," she said, and I could hear the pride behind the words. "I raised you to be smarter than that." Then faintly, I heard another voice in the background. "A nurse, Mrs. Aldridge. We need to check your blood pressure again. Still elevated." Mom didn't respond to her. Tried to keep her voice steady. "You don't need to worry about me, but I did. And now I knew she wasn't okay." "Not really." I swallowed hard. "You're not telling me the whole truth." She sighed. "Mothers lie sometimes, especially when they know their daughters are carrying enough already." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, holding the phone to my ear like it was the last thing keeping me upright. "I've got one more thing to do," I said quietly. "Then I'll come stay with you for a while. Promise, promise." We stayed on the line a few seconds longer. The silence between us warmed this time. Not heavy, but understood. After I hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. My resignation email still sat in drafts, ready, waiting. It wasn't just about reclaiming a title or correcting an injustice anymore. It was about time, my mother's time. The years I had spent building something for people who never saw me as more than convenient. Now I saw it clearly. They could keep the office, the applause, the company lunches. I had something they never understood how to value: ownership. And when the moment came, when I finally pressed send, I wouldn't be angry or vindictive. I would be calm, tired, yes, but calm. Because after everything, after the silence, the betrayal, the long nights and longer weekends, I had finally learned the difference between being loyal and being used. And the loneliest victory is still a victory. Goodbyes don't always come with tears. Sometimes they arrive in the shape of silence, stapled to half a page and sealed with the weight of years no one saw you carry. It was 9:30 p.m. when I pulled into the underground garage at Lockage Digital for what I already knew would be the last time. The security guard barely glanced up from his tablet, just waved me through with a nod. I had spent 9 years here, and somehow I had never felt more like a ghost. The building was dark except for the emergency lighting that cast long, cold shadows across the marble floor. I didn't take the elevator. I walked up all 4 flights to strategic operations, slowly, one last time. The office was empty, humming with the sterile quiet of after hours. I didn't bother turning on the main lights. I knew where everything was. My hand slid across the back of my chair as I sat down, facing the desk where I had spent more nights. Then I could count. The screensaver glowed gently, an image of a mountain range I had never actually visited. One by one, I packed my things. Not much. A framed photo of my mother. A paperweight I bought at a conference in Boston. A pen I was gifted after landing Morven Tech. And a folder labeled drafts filled with notes from ideas they never let me finish. I didn't cry, but I did pause, hand resting on the edge of my desk, eyes fixed on the spot where Mallory had once complimented my beautiful formatting. She had no idea what she'd stolen, but I did, and I was about to take it back. I opened. my personal laptop, and pulled up the document I had rewritten the night before a resignation. Cameron Aldridge. It was short, deliberate, half a page, no emotion, no blame, just facts. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my role at Lockage Digital in good standing and with gratitude for the opportunities afforded to me during my 9 years of service. No punctuation beyond the necessary, no flair, just closure. And then at the very bottom, barely noticeable, printed in 10-point Garamond, tucked beneath the formal signature line, a single sentence as outlined in Clause 9.4 of the Framework X licensing agreement. Rights to the strategic system shall revert to the original IP holder upon my voluntary departure in good standing. I reread it once, then again. That little line wasn't a threat. It was a key. A key to a door they didn't even realize was locked because they thought the system was theirs. The dashboards, the integrations, the client mapping. They believed it all belonged to Lockage Digital, but they never looked close enough. Never noticed the license had a kill switch. And that switch lived in my resignation. I printed 2 copies, signed both, slipped one into an envelope, and left it on the CEO's desk right beside the glass award I helped him win 3 years ago. I kept the other in my bag. As I walked out, I passed Mallory's new office. The door was open. Her desk was covered in color-coded notebooks, coffee cups, and a calendar already cluttered with deadlines she didn't understand. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The hallway lights buzzed gently overhead as I walked to the exit. My heels echoed against the tile. Each step a quiet drumbeat of resolve. By the time I reached the glass doors, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Stillness. Not the kind born of surrender, the kind born of certainty. This wasn't how I had imagined leaving. I always thought there'd be applause. Maybe a retirement cake years down the line, a photo in the company newsletter. Instead, there was just me, a paper bag of belongings, and a line of text that would dismantle their illusion before the weekend ended. I pressed the elevator button, watched the numbers descend. I didn't just walk away. I walked out with everything that mattered, and soon they would know. By 7:40 a.m., I was already at the cafe across from Lockage's main building. I wasn't doing. I wasn't even employed anymore, but something told me to wait. Not for drama, not for spectacle, but for confirmation. I wanted to see the moment the mask cracked. I sat by the window with a black coffee, watching employees file into the glass doors across the street like nothing had changed. As far as they knew, it hadn't yet. At 8:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. David Lockage, subject, urgent. Please come up. I didn't respond. I just stood up, walked across the street, and swiped my badge one last time before it deactivated. The turnstile clicked open, and I rode the elevator to the executive floor in silence. When I stepped into his office, David was already pacing. Cameron, he said without looking up, voice too light to be casual, too tight to be calm. Close the door, would you? I did gently, then took the chair across from him, the same one I'd sat in when I accepted the job 9 years ago. He held the printed copy of my resignation in one hand, the pages slightly crumpled at the edges. His eyes flicked from the top, line to the bottom, then back up, then back down again, like he couldn't believe what he was reading. You're leaving, he said, though it wasn't a question. I nodded once. Effective immediately. He cleared his throat. You've been with us almost a decade, Cameron. I would have appreciated at least a conversation. I raised an eyebrow, like the one you had with Mallory before giving her my role. His jaw flexed. No response. Instead, he looked down again, this time slower, until his eyes landed on the final line, the small print, the trap. He blinked, leaned in. It's Clause 9.4, he muttered. Silence stretched between us. Then, almost in disbelief, he reached over to his side drawer, pulled out a thick blue folder, and began flipping through old contracts. I recognized the tab's legal approvals from 2023 during the expansion phase. He found the one he was looking for and laid it flat on the desk between us. His fingers trembled slightly as he read aloud. Licensor Aldridge Strategy Group, LLC. Clause 9.4. Upon voluntary resignation of consultant Cameron Aldridge, all rights revert to the original IP holder. Effective immediately. He didn't finish the sentence. His face, normally flushed with certainty and boardroom polish, went gray. You are the architect, he whispered. Not just the strategist, the owner. I said nothing. You built the system, he continued, eyes wide. The integration platform, the client handoff tools, the entire AI framework. Again, I stayed silent. David sank slowly into his chair, hands still gripping the paper like it might vanish if he let go. The breath left his body in a slow, uneven exhale. I didn't read the licensing details, he muttered. I assumed it was internal. Mallory told me. At the mention of her name, I saw it land. He realized in that moment that he had handed the launch of an $86 million platform to someone who didn't own it, didn't understand it, couldn't control it, and the one person who did was already gone. Finally, he looked at me, face drained of color. What happens now? I stood. That depends, I said, my voice steady, on whether you'd like to call the board before or after the system shuts down. Then I turned and walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to look back and offer what I knew would be my last words in that office. You gave the title to the wrong person, David, but the power that was never yours to give. And with that, I left him alone in a room full of contracts he never bothered to read. The collapse didn't come with sirens, came with silence, long aching pauses in meetings, confused glances at dead dashboards, and error messages blinking like static. Behind every screen. Started at 9:15 a.m., just a day after I walked out. Lockage's AI-driven strategy hub. Once their crown jewel froze mid-sync during a live client pitch. 3 departments tried rebooting. 3 tickets were submitted. But the truth was already crawling through the back-end systems like rust on steel. The framework was gone, not erased, just reverted. Back to me. By 11:30 a.m., Mallory was ushered into a glass-walled meeting room, surrounded by engineers and advisors, all talking too quickly for her to follow. I wasn't there, of course, but word spread fast through people I'd once trained people still. Loyal enough to forward me the internal emails, the screenshots, the looks exchanged behind closed doors. Failing API handshake with Aldridge Strategy. License access revoked from core modules. Who authorized the transition? By 10:05 p.m., a hastily scheduled press briefing had been arranged to reassure investors about the temporary technical issues. Mallory was asked to speak. She wore a navy blazer 2 sizes too big and a confidence even smaller. With 3 microphones pointed at her, she smiled too wide, blinked too much, and read from a note card written by someone who clearly hadn't told her the full truth. Lockage remains fully committed to innovation, she began, and our AI rollout continues to operate on a foundation designed in-house by our incredible strategic team. Only it didn't. Midway through her address, a journalist raised their hand. Can you explain what's causing the reported disruptions in your AI dashboard and why? Aldridge Strategy LLC is now listed as the framework's sole owner in the licensing registry? Mallory froze, literally. She looked off stage. Someone signaled her to keep going. She blinked again, shuffled her notes, then stammered, I'd have to defer to legal for the specifics on that, but the damage was already done. By 2:02 p.m., every department head had received the same internal memo. Short, blunt, and impossible to ignore. Subject: Strategic Platform Ownership Update. Effective immediately, all rights and control to Framework X are no longer under Lockage Digital's operational purview. Per Licensing Clause 9.4, triggered by the voluntary departure of consultant Cameron Aldridge. All IP has reverted to Aldridge Strategy LLC. All integrations, systems, and roadmap dependencies are currently suspended pending renegotiation or acquisition terms. The subject line alone was enough to send ripples through every floor of the building. What they once saw as theirs the engine that powered their projections, their press releases, their hope was now gone. Not broken, not malfunctioning, gone. Some teams stopped working altogether. Marketing pulled their socials. Client relations scrambled to send out clarification statements to the top 10 accounts. Engineers sat in stunned silence, refreshing code bases that were now locked by an external license key, one eye alone held. Meanwhile, I was nowhere near the chaos. I spent the afternoon in my mother's living room, her favorite blanket over her. Legs, a quiet breeze coming in through the window. She looked better, rested. The color in her cheeks was slowly returning. I poured her tea while the TV played softly in the background. She glanced at the screen just as a headline flashed. Lockage faces major IP disruption amid executive shakeup. She looked at me, curious. Anything to do with you? I shrugged. Just a little housekeeping. And for the first time in weeks, she laughed. That evening, as I walked home alone, I checked my inbox. It was flooded. Messages from board members, ex-colleagues, even rival companies. But one message stood out. It was from an anonymous address sent to every Lockage investor, a single-line update. Ownership now rests where it always belonged. They built an empire on a system they never owned. And now the walls were crumbling from the inside out. Because sometimes the system doesn't crash, simply walks away. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't beg to be broken. It doesn't tremble, doesn't scream. It stands tall and waits because it already knows the world will come knocking. By 7:45 a.m. the next morning, my name was circulating in every email thread at Lockage, even though I hadn't stepped foot in that building in days. Former colleagues forwarded me screenshots with subject lines like, "Can Cameron reverse it?" Who authorized Clause 9.4. You didn't even know she had a company. And yet, I said nothing. The press kept digging. A few reporters emailed. Others messaged me through LinkedIn with phrases like, "Would love to feature your voice in our story. You have an incredible position to share insight. This is your moment." But I didn't need a moment. I already had what mattered, control. They were speaking, scrambling, spinning. I was just watching. That morning, I made myself coffee in the quiet kitchen of my apartment. My mother had gone back to her place the night before, stable, finally sleeping well. The doctor said she was responding better to medication now. I believed him. She looked lighter. I sat on my worn leather chair, opened my laptop, and logged into LinkedIn, not to post a victory speech or throw blame. It's just one sentence, measured, precise. When people hand you a ladder, don't let them climb over you. No hashtags, no emojis, no follow-up. It was liked over 6,400 times in 3 hours. Comments poured in, many from strangers, executives, consultants, women in tech, even former Lockage employees hiding behind initials and vague bios. They all seemed to know what I meant, and none of them asked me to explain. Meanwhile, Lockage was spiraling. Mallory hadn't been seen in the office since the press conference. David Lockage, once a man who boomed in meetings like a sermon, had gone quiet too. The board had called 2 emergency meetings in 48 hours. Investors were pulling out slowly but steadily, unsure who held the real reins now. And that's when the twist came. At 3:10 p.m., I received a private message. It was from a senior partner at a global investment firm, one whose name you'd recognize from headlines and economic forums. "Cameron, we've followed your work, both the visible and the invisible. Your strategic framework has the potential to go far beyond Lockage. We'd like to meet interested in discussing a joint venture to expand your AI system globally under your full creative and operational control. Let us know. We're prepared to move quickly." I read it 3 times, then once more, slower. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. All those nights I'd spent tweaking every decision tree, cross-validating integrations, mapping market, applications across regions. I'd built something they thought was just a tool, a lever. They never realized it was a launch pad. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I closed my laptop, stood by the window, and watched as the evening sun slipped behind the skyline, casting golden light over buildings that once towered over me like gods. Now they just looked like stepping stones. They had fired the wrong woman, promoted the wrong name, and in doing so, they'd set something free. Not a product, not a platform. Me and the silence I left behind. It didn't mean I was gone. It meant I was just getting started. It's strange how full circle moments rarely feel loud. Sometimes closure arrives not with a bang, but with a quiet nod, a stage light, and a microphone that finally speaks the truth. The invitation came 2 weeks after the Lockage fallout. A major tech conference was being hosted in Denver. 3 days of panels, product launches, and innovation showcases. I'd spoken at events before, usually in closed breakout rooms or behind company logos, but this time was different. This time my name was at the top of the speaker list. Cameron Aldridge, founder, Aldridge Strategy Group. There it was, my own name. No company shielding it, no CEO looming over it, just me. I flew in the night before, stayed in a quiet boutique hotel near the venue, and slept better than I had in months. The next morning I arrived backstage in a soft gray pantsuit and flats that didn't try to impress anyone. I wasn't here to prove I belonged. I already knew I did. As I stood behind the curtain, waiting to go on, I scanned the program booklet. A familiar name caught my eye. Mallory Lacoche, guest attendee. Panel 3C. No title, no role, just her name. Sitting alone like a disconnected thought. The session coordinator motioned me forward. I stepped onto the stage to soft applause from a packed auditorium. Some knew me from the headlines. Others only knew the framework, but all of them were watching. I began my talk with a simple slide. Building systems that outlive titles. I didn't mention Lockage by name. I didn't need to. I spoke about sustainable strategy, about designing frameworks that don't collapse under ego or short-term thinking. I talked about clarity, discipline, and what happens when vision isn't protected. The audience leaned in, not because I was dramatic, but because I was direct. Every sentence was clean, measured, quietly powerful. By the time I stepped off stage, my phone was buzzing again. Requests to meet, partnerships, press inquiries. But none of it rattled me. I had already won what I came for, the room. I made my way into the networking lounge afterward, accepting a cup of tea from a junior organizer who looked at me like I was made of myth. I smiled, thanked her, and scanned the room. That's when I saw her. Mallory. She stood near a back table, mostly alone, twisting a ring on her finger. Gone was the posture of entitlement, the strut of someone convinced the world owed her. She looked quiet, small even. Our eyes met briefly. She hesitated, then looked away. I turned back toward the center of the room, already ready to leave the day behind me, when a voice called out from the stage. We'd like to invite anyone who'd like to offer closing reflections to come forward. It was open mic, brief, voluntary. To my surprise, Mallory stepped forward. She approached the mic slowly, clutching a folded piece of paper, but not looking at it. I wasn't planning to speak, she began, voice low, but I think maybe I need to. A few heads turned, a few whispered. She took a breath. I wasn't ready. When I was given the role at Lockage, I thought I could figure it out as I went. But the truth is, I didn't build it. She did. Her voice wavered, but didn't break. She should have owned it from the start, and I should have respected that. Then she stepped back. No fanfare, no defense, just truth. I didn't clap, not out of spite, but because the moment didn't need noise. It had enough gravity on its own. I finished my tea and stepped out onto the balcony. The city buzzed below, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like it was rushing past me. Psst. It felt like it had made room. I had let them take credit. Let them climb on my work. Let them rename it. But now the system had my name on it again, and the one who once stood on my shoulders. She finally looked up and saw me, not as a stepping stone, but as the one who built the path. Legacies aren't always born in applause. Sometimes they're carved slowly through long nights, unseen labor, and a refusal to let your name be erased. And sometimes after everything, you get to sign your name at the top. It was a cool, crisp morning in Seattle when I stepped onto the stage of my own making. The room wasn't as large as the Denver conference, but it was fuller in a different way. This time, every person in the audience had chosen to follow a vision that was mine. My team, my system, my name on the walls, the lanyards, and the keynote. Aldridge Strategy Group, Vision in Practice. That was the name of our launch event. That was the name of the future. I wore a soft navy blazer, structured, clean, and familiar. The same one Mallory had mocked during a staff meeting months ago. Too stiff, she'd said, half laughing, like you're trying to be important. I smiled at the memory now because today no one was questioning my place. The blazer still fit, but this time it looked like it belonged. My team stood at the wings. Engineers, designers, project leads, some from Lockage, most from beyond. Each one chosen because they believed in structure, in clarity, in doing things right the first time. No politics, no shortcuts, just quiet excellence. Ready? One of them asked, passing me the remote clicker. Always, I said. I stepped onto the stage and faced the crowd. Dozens of eyes looked back with curiosity and respect. I didn't need to perform. I just needed to tell the truth. 3 years ago, I designed something that wasn't meant to make headlines. It wasn't about branding. It wasn't even about credit. It was about solving a problem no one else seemed willing to see clearly. I clicked to the next slide. A clean interface, intuitive design, scalable from startups to global operations. The new version of Framework X, rebuilt, refined, and renamed. I walked the room through its layers, automated ethical checkpoints, human-centered data interpretation, customizable integration paths. The system now protected not just performance, but people. And this time, I added, it's not hidden behind a logo that isn't mine. Applause rose softly, sincerely. I let it settle before motioning to the screen one last time. Before we wrap, I said, I want to show you something we found while digging through archived files. It's not code, it's not strategy. It's a note. The screen faded to black. Then a short handwritten line appeared, centered in white. This will only work if no one knows I made it. CA 2022. The room went still. I let the silence breathe. Let it say what words didn't need to. That was me, I said softly. That was who I was when I built it. Quiet, careful, intentional. Then I smiled. But this. I swept my hand toward the screen, now filled with my team's names, titles, photos. This is who I am now. Not erased, not borrowed, claimed. After the presentation, there were questions, handshakes, new contracts, drafted before I'd even stepped off the platform. But the part I'll remember most wasn't business. It was standing by the exit, watching people leave with notebooks full of ideas I had once only dared to keep in secret folders. A woman, maybe in her 60s, stopped beside me and said quietly, I wish we had someone like you where I used to work. We might have stayed. I just nodded. It's not too late to build something new, because that's what this was now. Not revenge. Not even redemption. A beginning. One I owned, one I shaped, one I didn't have to hide. And this time I wrote my name in bold.